Welcome to Archive Whispers, a place to fall asleep. Settle in, lower the lights, and let the archive open.
This morning, a market that has no walls and no floor but the river. Somewhere in the low green country of old Siam, in the season when the rains have eased and the water lies wide and brown and slow between the palms. There is no event here to follow and no name you need to keep. There is only a town built upon the water, waking the way it has always woken, one boat and one slow ripple at a time. Let the city stay nameless, and the years stay soft and unimportant. It is enough to know that the great river breathes in and out with the tide, that the canals run off from it like quiet veins, and that along those canals, in the grey light, the people are beginning, without hurry, to move their lives out onto the water. We will simply stay here, near the landing, and watch the slow morning come. Before the light there is the water, and the water is never quite still. Even now, in the last of the dark, it moves against the house posts with a small repeated sound, a soft lapping that has gone on all night and will go on all day, so familiar to the people sleeping above it that they would wake only if it stopped. The houses stand on tall wooden legs above the canal, their floors a little higher than the highest water of the year, and beneath them the river slides on, patient and brown and cool. The sky over the palms is not yet color, only a paleness, a thinning of the night that comes up slowly from the east beyond the river. The stars there have already withdrawn. A faint gray settles on the rooftops first, on the steep tiled ridge of the temple across the water, on the thatched eaves of the smaller houses, and then, more slowly, it reaches down to the water itself, which holds the light the way old metal holds it, dull and soft, and without any glitter. Mist lies on the canal in long, low banks, thicker where the water is wide, thinning to nothing under the houses. It does not drift so much as rest, a pale weight upon the surface, and through it, the far bank shows only as a darker suggestion, a line of trees that could as easily be a line of cloud. The air is cool and heavy with the smell of the river, of wet wood and mud and green things growing, and somewhere within it the first faint sweetness of smoke, where an early fire has been laid. Under one of the houses a dog stirs, circles once on the dry ground between the posts, and lies down again. A bird calls from the bank, a single low note, unhurried, and is answered by another further off, and then the quiet comes back. These are the first sounds of the day, spaced wide apart, each one allowed to finish before the next begins, as though the morning itself were reluctant to fill the silence too quickly, and preferred, for now, to let the water do most of the speaking. In the houses the people wake without clamor. There is no bell to call them, no hour marked upon a face. They wake to the gray at the window gaps and the change in the air, the way their parents woke, and their parents before them, by the slow lightening of the world. A woman pushes aside the woven mat that hangs across a doorway and steps out onto the narrow wooden landing that runs along the front of her house, just above the water, and she stands there a moment, doing nothing, only breathing in the cool. Within, by the soft yellow light of an oil lamp, the day begins with small and ordered things. The cold rice from the evening before is uncovered. The fire in its clay brazier is coaxed up from the banked embers with a few slow breaths and a handful of dry coconut husk, and a blackened pot is set above it to warm. The lamp throws long, soft shadows on the plank walls, and the smell of the first smoke mingles with the river air, and nothing is rushed, because nothing here has ever been improved by rushing. Out on the canal the first boat appears, low and narrow, a single dugout poled along the near bank by a figure who stands at the stern with an easy, practiced balance. The pole goes down, finds the mud, and the boat slides forward a length and a little more. Then the pole comes up, dripping, and goes down again. And the rhythm of it is so even and so quiet that the boat seems less to be driven than to be drifting of its own accord, parting the mist and leaving behind it a long, smooth wake that the water slowly forgets. The water here is the road and the field and the well together, the one thing that touches every house and every life. A child learns its moods before it learns to read, learns where the current runs strong and where it eddies, where the mud is soft and where a sunken log waits, where the lotus crowds the shallows and where the channel stays open. To live along the canal is to know the water as one knows a member of one's own family, by long habit, by small daily attention, and by a trust that is never quite complete. Further along, where the canal widens before the temple, a raft house sits moored against the bank, a whole dwelling built upon a float of bound bamboo, rising and falling so gently with the water that one would never see it move. Its front is open to the canal, and within the soft dark of it one can make out the shapes of goods set ready, baskets and jars and bundles. For this is a house that is also a shop, and its threshold is not a door onto a street but a low rail above the moving water. The light grows by such small degrees that no single moment can be called the dawn. The gray warms very slowly toward the faintest gold. The mist begins here and there to lift and thin, and the shapes that were only suggestions a little while ago take on their edges and their colors. The dark red-brown of wet teak, the soft green of the water, the dull ochre of a thatched roof. The far bank becomes trees again, and then becomes trees with houses among them, and then becomes a place where, one sees now, other people are also beginning their morning. A second boat comes out from beneath a house, and a third from a side channel, each one low in the water and quiet, each one carrying a single figure and a load covered against the damp. They do not hail one another, not yet. They only nod, perhaps, or lift a hand, and let their boats pass with a hand's breadth of water between them, the small wakes crossing and folding into one another and smoothing away again. The canal is filling, slowly, the way a room fills with people who have known each other all their lives, without announcement. On a landing, a man crouches and lowers an earthenware jar into the canal, lets it fill with a soft swallowing sound, and lifts it dripping to carry within. The river is the water they cook with and wash in and drink, after it has stood a while in the great jars and let its silt fall quietly to the bottom, and so the canal is treated with a certain care, the way one treats a thing that gives much and asks, in return, only that it not be fouled too near the houses where the water is drawn. The temple stands a little apart, where the canal bends, its grounds raised on a low earthen bank above the flood, its tiled roofs steep and many-layered and dark with the night's damp. A wall of whitewashed brick, softened and stained by the seasons, runs along the water, and above it the pale spire of a chedi catches the early light before anything else, so that for a while it seems to glow faintly of its own accord, while the rest of the world is still gray. From within the grounds comes, very low, the sound of chanting, even and unhurried, a sound older than anyone now living. The smell of cooking comes more strongly now, drifting low across the water from a dozen hidden fires. It is the smell of rice steaming, of fish laid on a grate above coals, of palm sugar melting somewhere into a dark sweetness, and over all of it the faint resinous note of the smoke itself, held down by the cool morning air so that it lies upon the canal like a second, fragrant mist. A listener who had never seen this place could know, by the smell alone, that the houses along the water were full of quiet, ordinary work. By now the gold has come properly into the east, low and level, and it lays a long band of soft light down the length of the canal, so that the water there is no longer green but a moving sheet of dull bronze, and every boat that crosses it is for a moment edged in fire and then released again into shadow. The palms stand black against the brightness, their fronds quite still, and the herons that have fished the shallows all night lift, one by one, on slow wide wings, and carry themselves off to wherever herons go when the day begins. And still there is no hurry in any of it. The boats come and go, the fires send up their thin smoke, the chanting rises and falls behind the temple wall, and the water carries it all, the sound and the smoke and the light, on its slow brown back toward the great river and the sea. This is the hour before the market truly gathers. the hour of preparation and of small private things, and it is worth staying in a while, for it is the gentlest part of the day, and it asks nothing of anyone, least of all of us who have only come to watch. There is a particular hush that comes over the canal a little after the first gold, and the people who live along the water know it without being told. The boats that were already out draw a little aside. The talk, what little there was of it, falls away, and the women who have been waiting on their landings settle onto their knees, smoothing their cloth, setting before them a covered basket or a small pot kept warm. They are waiting, as they wait every morning, for the monks to come, and the morning seems to hold its breath with them. Across the water from the landing of the temple, a narrow boat puts out, and in it sit two figures in robes the color of turmeric and old gold, the deep warm ochre that the eye finds at once, even at a distance, and even in the soft light of morning. A novice, young and bare-shouldered, kneels at the stern and works the paddle with slow, careful strokes, while before him sits an older monk, quite still, an alms bowl held in his lap within the folds of his robe, his eyes lowered to the water. This is the alms round, the binthabat, the going out with the bowl that the monks perform each morning before they eat, and have performed in this land for longer than the temple has stood. They do not beg, and they do not ask. They only come and pass, and receive what is freely placed before them. And the giving of it is not charity, but something gentler and more mutual, a small daily exchange in which the layperson offers food and receives, in return, the chance to give. The boat moves from landing to landing along the bank, unhurried as everything else. At the first landing the boat slows, and the novice ships his paddle and lays a hand on the wooden edge to hold them steady against the slow drift of the current. The woman there lifts the cloth from her basket and takes up a small ball of rice, warm and white, and pressed in her fingers, and she leans forward and sets it gently into the open bowl, and then a second, and a folded banana leaf with something within it, and a single ripe banana from a hand of them beside her. She does not speak, and the monk does not thank her, for that is not the way of it. When the giving is done, she presses her palms together and raises them before her face and bows her head, and holds the gesture a moment, in stillness, while the boat draws away, and the monk, for his part, lowers his eyes again to the bowl and to the water, having received without looking at her, as is proper, so that nothing of pride or of obligation should pass between them, only the rice and the morning and the long quiet understanding that holds the whole thing together. The boat goes on. At the next landing an old man waits, and at the one after that a girl no higher than the rail, holding her offering in both hands with a child's grave care, watched from the doorway by her mother. Each gives what their house can spare, a little rice always, and then whatever else there is, a piece of dried fish, a sweet of palm sugar and coconut wrapped in leaf, a few small bananas, a lotus seed pod broken open. The bowl fills slowly with the ordinary food of ordinary people, and that is exactly as it should be. From within the temple grounds, at some moment that no one quite marks, a single bell is struck, one deep round note that swells out over the wall and across the water and goes on sounding long after the striking of it, fading by such slow degrees into the general quiet that the ear cannot say when it has truly gone. It is not a summons and not a warning, only a marking of the hour by the temple's own reckoning, and the boats on the canal take no more notice of it than they would of the call of a bird, for it is as much a part of the morning as the light. The novice paddles on, and the older monk sits as still as before, and one might wonder what passes in his mind through all of this, whether he counts the landings, or thinks of the meal to come, or thinks of nothing at all. Having long ago let the morning paddle of the boat become a kind of slow and floating stillness in which thought itself grows quiet. The robe stirs a little in the air off the water. The bowl grows a little heavier. The bank slides past, house by house, landing by landing, each with its kneeling figure and its small, warm gift. Behind the boat, the morning closes over again as smoothly as the water closes over its wake. The women rise from their knees and gather their baskets and turn back to their houses and their fires. The old man stands a moment longer, looking out at the canal, before he too goes in. The girl is led away by the hand. The act, having been done, leaves no mark upon the day except a certain settledness, a sense that the morning has now been properly begun, that the first and most important thing has been attended to, and that all the rest may now follow at its leisure. Further off, where the canal joins a wider channel, other boats are doing the same slow work for other temples, for there are many along this water, each with its own monks and its own bell and its own circle of houses that look to it. One can see, far down the bright reach, 2 or 3 small ochre shapes moving against the green, each parting the morning in its own quiet way, and it is a thing that has happened on this river every dawn for so many lifetimes that to watch it is to watch something very nearly outside of time, a habit of devotion worn as smooth and as deep as a path worn into stone. When at last the bowl is full enough, the novice turns the boat in a long, slow curve back toward the temple landing, and the 2 of them go in beneath the trees, where the food will be shared among all the monks of the house and eaten before the sun stands high, for they will not eat again until the next morning's round. The empty landings along the bank keep, for a while, the faint shapes pressed into them by kneeling, and then the day's traffic smooths even those away, and the alms hour is over, and the market hour, very gently, begins. And so the canal returns to its own affairs, but changed a little, warmed a little, as a room is changed by a kindness done in it early and then forgotten. The light is fuller now, and the mist is all but gone, lingering only in the deepest shade beneath the far trees. The water has taken on its full daytime green, and along both banks the doors and shutters stand open, and the houses breathe, and the smell of finished cooking gives way to the smell of the river and the gardens and the first cut fruit. The slow morning gathers itself, without a word, toward the work of the day. The market does not open, it gathers. There is no gate to be unlocked and no hour at which a thing begins, only a slow thickening of the traffic where 2 broad canals come together before the temple, a place a little wider than the rest, where the current eases and a boat may sit without drifting far. To this place, by 1s and 2s, out of every side channel and from beneath the farther houses, the boats begin to come, each low in the water with its load, each finding its way to the loose and shifting crowd of others. They come heaped with the morning's produce, gathered from the gardens and the orchards and the rice land behind the houses, or carried down from the country upstream in the cool of the night. One boat rides low under a mound of green and yellow, bananas in great heavy hands, still on their stems. Another carries baskets of mangosteen. Dark and round and cool, their hard purple rind hiding the white fruit within. A third is bright with the soft pinks and greens of other fruits, mango and rambutan and the pale flesh of cut melon, arranged with a care that is half for selling and half for the simple pleasure of arranging. From the rice boats comes the plena, deeper wealth of the country, the sacks and baskets of husked grain that are the true foundation of every meal and every market, white rice and the dark sticky rice that is steamed in baskets and eaten with the fingers. These boats are broad and heavy and ride deep, and they move slowly even for this slow place, and the men who pole them lean hard upon their poles. For a boat full of rice is a boat full of the labor of a whole season, gathered and carried, and now, grain by grain and basket by basket, to be given over to the town. And there are the flowers, which seem at first too gentle a cargo for a working morning, and yet are wanted as surely as the rice. A narrow boat sits half full of lotus, the long stems gathered in dripping bundles, the buds still closed and pale pink and tapering, and beside them the broad round leaves and the curious flat seed pods, green and pierced like the rows of a watering pot. These will go to the temples, most of them, to be offered before the images and laid upon the altars, and so the same water that carries food for the body carries also, in the next boat over, food for something quieter. An old woman holds her place near the middle of the gathering, her boat broad and shallow and laid out like a small floating shop, and she sells the things that every household wants and no single garden gives. There are little cones of dark palm sugar, wrapped in dried leaf and tied with a strand of its own fiber. There are the green leaves and the pale nuts and the small pot of lime for the betel that the old especially chew through the long afternoons. There is dried fish in flat, hard sheets, and fish paste in a covered jar, pungent even past its lid, and salt, and a coil of woven cord. The fish come up fresh from the night's catch, kept alive as long as may be in baskets trailed in the cool water alongside the boats, or laid on beds of green leaf and splashed now and then to keep them bright. They are river fish, mostly the silver and the gray and the dark, some no longer than a hand and some as long as an arm. And a few are still moving, and the man who sells them lifts one and lets it be seen and lowers it again, and names his price, and the buyer leans to look, and the bargaining, when it comes, is so soft and so slow that it might be mistaken for friendship. There is the heavy spiked weight of durian, too, in season. A few of them in the bottom of a boat, their thick smell reaching out over the water and turning heads long before the boat is near, loved and disliked in nearly equal measure, and argued over with more feeling than anything else for sale. And there are the smaller kinder fruits beside them, the coconut to be split for its water, the green papaya newer to this country than the rest, and still a little strange, the small sweet bananas that are the common coin of every meal and every gift. The boats do not hold still. They drift and turn and nudge against one another, held off with a hand or the flat of a paddle, and a buyer who wants the fruit of one boat and the fish of another will work her own small craft from the one to the other with little easy strokes, hooking a hand over a gunwale to hold the two together for as long as the dealing takes, and then letting go. The whole gathering is in slow, constant, gentle motion, 100 small adjustments a minute, and yet it never tangles, for everyone here has done this every morning of their lives, and reads the water and the boats as easily as breath. The talk over the boats is low and easy, and full of long pauses, the talk of people with the whole morning before them. There are no cries, no calling out of wares, no clamor of the kind a stranger might expect of a market, only the murmur of many quiet conversations laid one over another, rising and falling, the soft knock of hull against hull, the small slap of water, the creak of a basket lifted, and now and then a low laugh that carries a little way over the canal and is gone. It is a market that one could fall asleep beside, and no one would think it strange. Among the produce boats moves another kind, smaller and warmer, trailing a thread of smoke. The boats that sell not the makings of a meal but the meal itself, ready and hot. On a clay stove set in the bottom of one such boat, a pot of rice gruel keeps at a low simmer, and beside it bowls are stacked. And a buyer who has been on the water since before light may draw alongside and be handed a bowl across the gap and eat it there, balanced in her own boat, watching the market drift around her, and hand the empty bowl back when she is done. The sun is well up now, though still low enough to come slantwise across the water and to gild the undersides of things, the bottoms of the leaves, the wet curve of a paddle lifted, the cheek of a fruit turned to the light. The heat of the day has not yet come. The air is still soft, still cool in the shadows, and the people work in that easy band of the morning between the chill of dawn and the weight of noon, the band that everyone here knows to be the best of the day, and uses, without saying so, for the most of their living. A child sits in the prow of her mother's boat, doing nothing in particular, one hand trailing in the cool water, watching the other boats go by with the long, unhurried attention of the very young. Now and then her mother passes her a piece of fruit, or a word, and she takes the one and answers the other and goes back to her watching. She is learning the market without being taught it, learning the boats and the faces and the prices and the slow good manners of the water, the way all of it has always been learned here, by sitting in the prow on a morning like this and simply being present while the grown world turns gently around her. And the temple watches over all of it from the bend, its open landing busy now with the boats that have come to leave their lotus and their rice for the day's offerings, its bells silent again, its monks within at their single meal. The whitewashed wall holds the morning light and gives a little of it back, soft and warm. The chedi stands pale against the deepening blue of the risen sky, and between the temple and the market, on the bright moving water, The whole slow commerce of the town goes on, fruit for cowries, fish for rice, a flower for a blessing, the day unhurriedly buying and selling itself into being. The money of this market is small and various and old. For the least of purchases, a few fruits, a single fish, a handful of betel, there are the cowrie shells, the little pale shells brought up from the southern sea long ago and worn smooth by passing through so many hands, counted out by the dozen and the 100 into a cupped palm, light as nothing, clicking softly together. A child can carry a morning's worth of them in a knotted corner of cloth, and an old woman can tell their number by the weight alone, without looking, while she goes on talking of something else entirely. For the larger dealings there is silver, the small, heavy curled lumps of it that the country has used for money far back beyond anyone's grandfather. Each one stamped with the marks of the mint, each one worth a great many shells, kept wrapped and knotted away and brought out with a certain seriousness. A rice merchant and a buyer will settle their account in these, the little silver weights passing from one knotted cloth to another with a care that has nothing to do with distrust, and everything to do with the plain respect that people give to the fruit of long work. The bargaining itself is the slowest thing in the market, and the most enjoyed. A price is named, gently, almost as an aside. It is met with a small shake of the head, and a counter so much lower that both parties may smile at it. And then begins the long, soft middle of the thing, the weighing of the fruit in the hand, the remarking upon its quality and upon the lateness of the season and upon the health of the other's family. The slow drift downward and upward toward the price that both knew from the start they would reach, and that neither would have dreamed of reaching without first taking the proper, pleasurable time. When the price is at last agreed, there is no great show of it, only a small nod, and the goods change hands, and the shells or the silver are counted out, and the two boats hold together a moment longer while a last word or two is exchanged, a question about a son away in the rice fields, a remark about the durian coming soon, before they part and drift off each to their own next dealing. Nothing is signed and nothing is promised. The whole of it rests on memory and on the knowledge that they will all be here again tomorrow, on the same water, and the day after that, as their parents were. Along the banks, where the market presses close to the houses, the cooking has begun again in earnest, for many who come to the water to sell stay to feed the buyers, and the smell of it lies thick and good over this part of the canal. On a raft house turned to the morning trade, a woman tends 3 small clay stoves at once, the charcoal in them glowing low and even, and over the coals the food turns and steams and softens, and the smoke rises straight in the still air before it bends and drifts out across the boats. There is rice, of course, always rice, steamed soft and white, and heaped into a leaf or a worn bowl, and with it whatever the morning has provided, a little grilled fish flaked over the top, a spoon of dark relish made pungent with chili and fermented shrimp, a few leaves of something green and bitter from the garden, a wedge of fruit to follow. The food is plain, and it is good, and it is exactly the food of this place and no other, built up over long generations from what the water and the gardens give, owing nothing to anywhere far away. And there are the sweets, the small, careful pleasures that this country has always made so well, palm sugar cooked dark and caught at just the right moment, coconut milk thickened and salted faintly to set off the sweetness, sticky rice steamed and pressed and wrapped in leaf. Little soft things in pale greens and ambers, and the deep brown of the sugar, sold a few at a time for a few shells each. A grandmother buys a leaf of them for a waiting child, who eats them slowly on the thwart of the boat, watching the smoke and the water, swinging one bare foot. Not everything for sale is to be eaten. One boat carries earthenware, the round dark pots and the wide shallow bowls and the great water jars, stacked and nested and cushioned with straw, each one shaped on a wheel and fired in a kiln somewhere up the river and carried down to be sold where the people are. Another holds woven things, the mats and baskets and fish traps and broad shading hats, the work of long evenings, the reeds and bamboo split and soaked and worked into patterns that are useful first and beautiful almost without trying. The buyers move among it all with the unhurried thoroughness of people who do this every day and are in no danger of missing anything. A woman fills the bottom of her boat slowly over the course of an hour. A measure of rice here, a fish there, a bundle of greens, a new pot to replace one cracked in the night, a few sweets, a handful of betel, and the cowries and the small silver go out from her knotted cloth a little at a time, and the boat rides a little lower as the morning goes on, and she is in no hurry to be done, for the being out on the water among the boats is itself a part of the pleasure. There is a give and take to it that goes beyond the buying. A vendor with more bananas than the morning will take adds a few to the basket of an old friend, without counting them into the price. A buyer who finds a vendor short of shells waves the small difference away, to be remembered and made good another day. The market runs on these countless tiny kindnesses and adjustments as much as on the shells and the silver, a long, slow ledger of small debts and favors kept not on paper but in the shared memory of a community that has, after all, nowhere else to go and no one else to trade with, and so takes care. Above it all, the sky has opened into a clear and gentle blue, not the hard, bright blue of the high tropics at noon, but the softer blue of the morning, paling toward white near the horizon, with a few thin clouds drawn out across it like brushstrokes barely begun. The light comes down full now upon the water and the boats, warm and even, and the green of the canal has lost its dawn dullness and shines, where the boats have not stirred it, with a deep and quiet brightness, and the whole market sits within that light as within a held breath, busy and slow at once. A length of cloth changes hands at one boat, indigo dyed and folded, the everyday wrapped garment of the country, and the woman who buys it holds it up a moment against the light to see the depth of the color before she folds it away. Cloth is not made on the water, but in the houses behind it, on looms that stand in the shade beneath the floors, and a good length is a thing of some worth, the work of many quiet days, and it is bought with the same slow seriousness as the rice, and will be worn until it is soft and pale and worn through, and then becomes something else. The morning is at its fullest now, the water crowded and gentle, the trade going on in its 100 small soft voices, and yet even at its fullest it has nothing in it of haste or of strain. No one is late, for there is no hour to be late for. No one is anxious, for the morning will provide what it provides, as it always has. And a person sitting quietly in a boat at the edge of it all, neither buying nor selling, only resting an oar across the gunwales and watching, would be the least remarkable thing on the canal, and would be left in peace to watch as long as they liked. Back from the busy water, in the houses themselves, the morning has its own quieter shape. The shutters stand propped open to the air, and the woven mats are rolled and set aside, and the floors, which are swept first thing every day, are bare and cool and smooth underfoot, worn pale by generations of bare feet passing over them. A house here holds little and needs little. A few mats, a few jars, a chest perhaps, the cooking things, the loom, a shelf with an image upon it and a cup for offerings, and the great open shutters through which the river and its light come freely in. Beneath the house, in the shade between the posts where the ground is dry, much of the day's work is done. Here a loom stands, strung with thread the color of deep indigo and pale, undyed cotton, and a woman sits at it through the cooler hours, throwing the shuttle and drawing the beater toward her with a soft, repeated knock. The cloth growing by the width of a few threads at a time, so slowly that one cannot see it grow at all, only know by the evening that it has. The rhythm of the loom is one of the steady sounds of the morning, patient as the lapping of the water. Behind the houses, where the dry ground rises a little above the reach of the flood, lie the gardens, and they are as much a part of the morning's quiet wealth as the market on the water. Here grow the things too tender or too daily to carry far. The climbing gourds and the long beans, the patch of greens, the lime tree and the banana grove and the tall, slow palms whose sap is boiled down for the sugar, and a few flowering things kept for the temple and for pleasure. A path of beaten earth runs among them, and a child is sent along it with a basket to gather what the kitchen wants. The birds are busy in the gardens now. The small ones that live close to the houses, going about their own morning in the leaves with a soft, continuous stir of sound, a chirp and a rustle and a flutter, never loud, never still, a gentle underlayer to everything else. A pair of them work along the eaves. Another scolds briefly from the lime tree over some small matter of its own, and the broad, slow shapes of larger birds pass now and then high overhead, going down toward the open river, dark against the soft morning blue. The children who are too small for errands play at the water's edge, under a loose and easy watching, on the landings and the lower steps, dropping leaves into the canal to watch them carried off, paddling their hands, calling softly to one another, climbing in and out of a moored boat that an older child holds steady. They are at home on the water as fish are, having never known anything else, and they fall in and climb out and are dried and scolded gently and go back to it, and the canal, which could be a danger, is to them only the floor of the world, the wide, cool floor on which the whole of life is laid. An old man sits on his landing in the shade of the eaves, doing the slow work of the old, mending a fish trap, his fingers moving over the split bamboo with a sureness that needs no looking, the work falling into place under his hands almost of itself. Beside him a small pot of betel is set, and now and then he prepares a quid, the leaf and the nut and the trace of lime, and folds it and sets it in his cheek, and chews slowly, and looks out at the water, and says nothing to anyone, and is perfectly content, having reached the time of life when sitting and mending and watching the boats is work enough for any morning. The raft-houses along the front, the ones built upon the bound bamboo floats, have a different feel from the houses on posts, for they belong half to the land and half to the river, rising and settling with the water so gently that those who live aboard them cease, after a while, to feel the motion at all. Their fronts open straight onto the canal, and many are shops, the goods set out on a board just within, so that a customer need never step ashore but only draw alongside and be served across the rail. The whole transaction conducted from boat to floating doorstep over a hand's width of moving water. Within one such shop a man weighs out dry goods on a small hand balance, the little brass pans swinging and settling, while he watches the beam with one eye and talks of other things, salt and dried chilies and the dark fermented paste, sugar and oil and the long sticks of incense for the household shrine, the small necessary things that a house runs through and must always replace. The goods are kept in jars and baskets and cloth-tied bundles, ranged on shelves up the back wall, dim and fragrant, and the man knows the place of everyone without searching. The temple, through all of this, keeps its place at the center of things, not by ruling over the day, but by simply being there, the largest and the stillest of the buildings, the one place built to last beyond a single life. Its grounds are open to anyone, and through the morning people come and go on small errands of the spirit, leaving a lotus, lighting a stick of incense, kneeling a moment before the great calm image in the dim hall, exchanging a quiet word with a monk in the shade of a tree, and then returning to their boats and their work, carrying the temple's stillness back out with them into the day. Out on the canal, the first heat of the day begins, very gently, to make itself felt. The shadows have drawn in close beneath the boats and the eaves. The water, where the sun reaches it, throws up a soft, warm light that one feels on the underside of the chin, and the people, without any signal, begin to move a little more into the shade, to settle their broad hats lower, to let the pace of things slacken by another small degree. The market is not ending, not yet, but it is beginning, almost imperceptibly, to soften toward its close, the way a long, slow breath begins to turn at its height. A vendor whose boat is nearly empty counts her morning's small wealth into her cupped hand, the cowries and the worn silver, and is satisfied, and takes up her paddle to turn for home before the heat. She will go back the way she came, up the side channel and beneath the houses, and tie her boat in its shade, and carry in what little she did not sell, and rest through the middle of the day, and come again tomorrow. There is no triumph in a good morning and no despair in a poor one. There is only the long, even line of mornings, each one much like the last, carrying her steadily through her life. One by one, the boats begin to thin from the gathering, drifting off up this channel and that, each carrying its day's small purchases and its day's small earnings home through the warming water. The press of the market loosens, the spaces between the boats grow wider, the murmur of the trade falls quieter, and the canal, which an hour ago was so full, begins again to show its long green reaches between the moving craft. It is not an ending so much as a slow dispersal, the gathering coming undone as gently as it came together, leaving the water to the few and the unhurried. And so the morning comes, by the gentlest of degrees, toward its rest. The sun has climbed above the palms and stands now in a soft white sky, and the heat lies easy on the water, and the canal, emptied of its market, has gone quiet again, and slow and green. The few boats still outmove without aim, in no hurry to be anywhere, and the water closes behind them without a mark, and the light lies on it. Warm and even and unmoving, the way light lies on a thing that is at last allowed to be still. Beneath the houses, the work has slowed almost to stillness. The loom is quiet, the shuttle laid to rest among the threads. The old man has finished his fish trap and set it by, and leans now against the post with his eyes half closed, and the beetle grows slow in his cheek. The children have wearied of the water, and lie in the shade of the floor above them, on the cool, swept ground, drifting in and out of a light midday sleep. And no one calls them, for there is nothing now that needs doing, and the heat itself counsels rest. The water laps against the house posts, as it lapped before the light, as it has lapped all morning, as it will lap all the long afternoon, a small repeated sound, soft and even, rising and falling, the oldest sound of this place, and the last one a person notices before sleep. It asks nothing and means nothing and simply continues, patient beyond patience, the river going on about its endless quiet business beneath the floors of the sleeping town. Out on the open water, the lotus has come fully into the light now, and the buds that were closed and pale at dawn have loosened, here and there into soft open flowers, pink fading to cream at the heart, standing a little above the broad still leaves. A boat passes far off and is gone, and the small wake reaches the lotus at last, long after, and stirs the leaves a little, and lets them settle, and the flowers nod once, slowly, and are still again, holding the light. The pale chedi of the temple stands in the high light, as it stood in the first gray of dawn, only warmer now, and surer, holding the day upon its smooth flank without effort, as it has held so many thousands of days. The chanting behind the wall has long since ceased. The monks have eaten and withdrawn into the shade and the stillness of the middle hours, and the temple keeps its watch in silence over the quiet water, the way it has kept it for longer than the oldest person in the town can remember being told of. A single boat is tied now beneath a house, its morning's work done, rocking the least amount upon the water, and within it the day's small cargo sits covered against the heat, the rice and the fruit and the new clay pot, waiting to be carried up. No one comes for it yet. It rides at its rope, and the rope tightens and slackens, with the small motion of the water, and the boat turns a slow hand's breadth one way and then the other, and there is nothing in the whole world it needs to do. The air is heavy and warm and still, and full of the soft mingled smells of the place, the river and the mud and the green gardens, the last faint thread of a cooking fire gone now to gray ash, the sweetness of the open lotus, the warm dust of the path. A bird calls once from the far bank, low and unhurried, and is not answered, and the quiet that follows is deeper than before, the deep settled quiet of the middle of the day, when the morning's work is done and the afternoon has not yet begun, and the whole town leans together toward rest. In the houses the people lie down through the heat, on the cool mats by the open shutters, and the river light moves softly on the plank ceilings above them, thrown up from the water in slow wavering bands that shift and fold and shift again, the way light moves on the underside of a bridge, endlessly and without pattern, soothing to watch until the watching blurs. One by one their eyes grow heavy, and the wavering light grows soft, and the sound of the water rises gently to fill the room as the world begins to slip away. And the water laps against the posts, soft and even, rising and falling, and the boat turns slowly at its rope, one hand's breadth and then the other. And the lotus holds the light upon the still green water, and the pale chetty stands warm and silent above the wall. And the bands of light move on the ceiling, shifting and folding, slower now, and softer and dimmer, as the eyes that watch them close. There is nothing here to remember, and nothing here to keep. The morning happened as it has happened 10,000 times, and will happen again tomorrow, and the day after. The boats and the bowls and the lotus and the rice, the slow water and the patient light, the long, unhurried round of an ordinary life on an ordinary canal in the old green country by the river. It asked nothing of you. It only let you rest beside it for a while. So let the boat turn slowly at its rope. Let the lotus hold the light. Let the water lap against the posts, soft and even, rising and falling, rising and falling. Let the warm air lie still upon the green canal, and the pale chetty keep its silent watch, and the whole slow town drift down together into the quiet of the afternoon. There is time. There has always been time. Rest now here by the old water, and let the slow morning carry you gently down into sleep. And the water laps against the posts, soft and even, rising and falling. And again, and again. And the light grows dim and warm and kind, and the green water grows still, and the old morning closes over quietly, like water closing over a wake, leaving no mark at all. Sleep now. The river will keep on without you. It always has.
You've reached the end of tonight's archive. If you're still awake, thank you for staying. And if you drifted off somewhere in the dark, then it did its work. Rest now. The next chapter will be here when you are. Sleep well. This has been Archive Whispers.